My name is William, 35 years old, a self-made millionaire living in San Francisco where steep streets and morning fog have become part of my life. I run a tech company specializing in artificial intelligence, which has taken me from a poor boy in a small town to the pinnacle of my career. My penthouse overlooks the bay, filled with light and luxury, but sometimes it feels strangely empty. Success, money, I have it all, but what I've always longed for is the warmth of family. I grew up in a small town, an 8-hour drive from San Francisco. My parents were factory workers, so when I was young, our family's life was always a struggle due to scarcity. My childhood was tied to dark evenings without electricity, meager meals of just potatoes and boiled vegetables. At 18, I left my hometown, entered university on a scholarship, and began building everything from scratch. Now I regularly send money back to support my parents, covering all their living expenses and helping Jack, my younger brother, secure a house, a car, and a stable job. I do all this out of a sense of duty, and deep down I always hope that one day my family will be proud of me. But all my efforts shattered on my mother's 65th birthday. That day it was pouring rain. The raindrops pounded against the windshield as if they could pierce through, the howling wind mingling with the sound of tires skidding on the slick road. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, my eyes straining to see the blurry road ahead. The car's clock showed 6 p.m., but the sky was pitch black, like midnight. 8 hours of driving from San Francisco to the small town where my parents live. The winding road and relentless storm never let up. The birthday cake I spent the entire evening preparing sat safely in its box on the passenger seat, the faint scent of buttercream lingering. In my coat pocket was a box containing a gold necklace adorned with pearls, a gift I meticulously chose for my mother's birthday. I smiled, imagining how her face would light up when she saw me walk in after months away. But this storm, it was as if it wanted to swallow every plan. The road was slippery, the car swayed a few times, and my heart skipped a beat. At moments I wondered if I was crazy for driving in this weather. But then I thought of my mother, the years of hardship she sacrificed, and I pressed the gas pedal, pushing forward. The closer I got to the town, the more my heart raced with excitement. I pictured the family gathered together, my father laughing heartily, Jack teasing me as usual. I had planned for a week, baking the cake, choosing the gift, driving back despite the company being swamped with work, all to create a memorable moment. But the heavens didn't comply. The rain grew heavier, the roads flooded, and I arrived later than planned. When the town sign appeared in the glow of my headlights, the clock was nearing 9 p.m. I let out a sigh of relief, slowing down. My mother's house was at the end of a dirt road tucked behind a row of trees. I turned off the engine and sat in the car for a moment, listening to the steady patter of rain on the roof. My breathing slowed. I had made it. I was home. Stepping out of the car, the rain stung my face with its icy chill. Holding the cake box, I carefully shielded it with my coat. The necklace sat snugly in my pocket, and I touched it to ensure it was still there. The house glowed with warm light, and laughter and chatter spilled out from the living room. I paused, peering through the window. My father sat in an armchair, my mother wore a paper birthday hat, and Jack was animatedly telling a story, his hands gesturing wildly. The family was joyful, unaware of my arrival. Perfect. This was my chance to surprise them. I circled to the back door and entered the kitchen. It was unlocked. My mother still kept her old habits. The kitchen was dark, lit only by the faint glow from the living room. I set the cake box on the table and opened it. The cake was still pristine, smooth buttercream frosting with "Happy Birthday, Mom" written in chocolate. I smiled, proud. Baking wasn't my forte, but I had spent the entire previous evening perfecting it. My mother would love it, I was certain. I pulled candles from my bag and arranged them on the cake to form the number 65. Then I took out the necklace box and tied a red ribbon around it carefully. Everything had to be perfect. I imagined my mother opening the gift, hugging me, and the whole family laughing together. I flicked the lighter, about to light the candles, but then I froze. The voices from the living room grew clearer. My mother, father, and Jack. They were saying something, their tones more serious than before. Curiosity got the better of me, and I crept closer to the kitchen door, standing in the shadows, listening. William still hasn't arrived at this hour? With this rain and slippery roads, something bad could happen. My father's voice was low, but there was a chilling edge to it. My mother let out a soft sigh. What happens, happens. If something were to happen to him, well, the fortune, the house, the company, everything would come to us. That wouldn't be such a bad thing. I stood frozen, my heart as if gripped by an invisible hand. Had I misheard? Then Jack's voice cut through, laced with a hint of disdain. He thinks I just need a place to live, a car, a mediocre job. But I don't just want those things. He doesn't even realize his company is worth hundreds of millions. If something happened to him, who wouldn't see me as the rightful heir? The blood in my veins seemed to turn to ice. My head spun. Those words, from my father, my mother, my own brother, were like knives slicing into my heart. They wanted me dead. They wanted me gone so they could take everything. The family bond, the years I sacrificed, the times I sent money and helped them. It was all a joke to them. I looked at the cake on the table, the unlit candles. The necklace in its gift box gleamed faintly under the dim light. I had driven through a storm, carrying love and dedication, only to hear these words. The truth was so cruel, so brutal, that all I could do was stand motionless. I wanted to burst in, confront them, smash something. But I couldn't. I just stood there in the flickering light of the kitchen. I couldn't face them, not now. I didn't want them to see me, didn't want them to know I had heard everything. I placed the cake box and the gift neatly on the kitchen table. The necklace sat there like a silent farewell. I flicked off the lighter and slipped it into my pocket. No need for candles anymore, no need for surprises. I opened the back door and stepped outside. The rain was still falling, bone-chillingly cold. But I felt nothing. I walked to the car, slid into the driver's seat and closed the door. My clothes and hair were soaked, but I didn't care. I looked at the house one last time. The lights still glowed and laughter still echoed. They didn't know I had come, and I didn't want them to know. I drove off with no destination in mind. The town's streets were blurry in the rain. Then I stopped at a small roadside motel and rented a room. The owner looked at me, asking why I seemed so exhausted. I gave a faint smile, saying I had driven a long way. The room was simple, the bed hard, but I didn't care. I sat down and looked out the window. The rain kept falling as if it wanted to wash everything away. I pulled out my phone and saw a message from my mother. "Where are you? The roads are bad, be careful." I stared at the message and let out a bitter chuckle. Be careful. They wanted me dead, yet still pretended to care. I didn't reply. I lay down on the motel's hard bed, staring at the stained ceiling. The sound of rain was steady outside the window. I couldn't sleep. The words of my father, mother, and Jack echoed in my mind, sharp like knives. And then memories of my childhood flooded back, like an old faded film, blurry but haunting. I remembered my early days when our family lived in a rickety wooden house in the town. The roof leaked, and every time it rained, my mother placed buckets around the floor to catch the water. My father worked at the factory. My mother took in sewing jobs, but money was never enough. Dinner was often just boiled potatoes or watery soup. I, a scrawny kid, was always hungry but didn't dare ask for more. "Eat less, this house isn't a charity," my father would snap when I eyed the plate of potatoes. My mother said nothing, just lowered her head. Jack, still young then, got an extra piece of bread from her, even though I was the older brother. I excelled in school, always at the top of my class, but my parents never praised me. "What's the point of studying? You're still a burden," my mother once said, her voice bitter. I gritted my teeth, vowing to escape poverty. At 18, I won a scholarship to a university in San Francisco. The day I left, my father only said, "Don't come back if you don't have money." Jack, then 13, smirked and said, "Go for good so I can eat more." My mother said nothing, just silently handed me a backpack. I fended for myself in the city, working every job, dishwasher, delivery boy, teaching assistant, to cover expenses. Not a single cent came from my family. On nights I stayed up studying, I thought of my mother, hoping one day she'd be proud. But every time I called home, she only asked, "Got any money yet?" "Send some back." I gritted my teeth and sent what I could, even when I was surviving on instant noodles. Now lying in the cold motel room, I realized I was never their son in their eyes. I was just a tool, a source of money. Tears rolled down my face, and for the first time that night I let myself cry. Not for them, but for myself, the boy who once believed family could overcome anything. Dawn broke and the rain had stopped, but the sky remained gray. I sat up and looked at myself in the mirror on the wall. Red, bloodshot eyes, deep, dark circles. I was no longer the William from yesterday, the one who drove through a storm with a hopeful smile. I was someone else, betrayed, wounded, but still with the strength to stand. I thought about the years after becoming a millionaire. My tech company, born from a crazy idea in a dorm room, had grown into a business worth hundreds of millions. I had a penthouse, cars, and business trips around the world. But I never forgot my family. I wanted them to live well, to make up for the days of poverty. I sent $10,000 a month to my parents, enough for them to live comfortably. I paid all their electricity, water, property taxes, home maintenance, and any other expenses. I cleared their bank debts, bought them a new car, and renovated the old wooden house into a proper home. Each time I visited, I saw my mother smile, my father pat my shoulder, and I thought, I did it. They're happy. Jack was a different story. He didn't go to college, drifted for a few years, then asked for my help. I didn't hesitate. I used my connections to get him a decent job at a bank. When he wanted to buy a house, I sent the down payment. The sports car he drove? My money paid for that too. I thought it was my duty as his older brother, even though Jack never said thank you. But now everything was clear. My family didn't value me. They only valued my money. I stood up and opened the window. A cold breeze hit my face as if waking me up. I had sacrificed too much only to receive deceit in return. I clenched my fists. It was time for a change. My phone buzzed on the table. I glanced at the screen. Mom calling. My heart tightened. Part of me wanted to scream into the phone to demand why they could be so cruel. But I took a deep breath, answered, and kept my voice calm. "Hello, Mom." "William, where are you?" Her voice was sweet, as if she hadn't said those words last night. "I saw the cake and the gift on the kitchen table. Why did you come and leave without saying anything?" I gripped the phone tightly, forcing my voice to stay even. The company had an urgent matter, so I had to leave right away. Didn't want to disrupt your birthday. "Oh, is that so?" She paused for a moment, then continued, "The necklace is beautiful, must be expensive, right? You're always so thoughtful. But next time, stay and have cake with me, okay?" I let out a bitter chuckle, careful not to let her hear. Thoughtful. They wanted me dead, yet still played sweet with me. "Sure, next time," I said, my voice cold. "I'm busy now, Mom. Rest well." I hung up before she could say more. The phone dropped onto the bed and I sank down, hands cradling my head. Her words were like salt rubbed into a wound. They didn't know I had overheard, didn't know I had seen their true faces. And I wanted to keep it that way, at least for now. I looked out the window. The small town was peaceful, but to me it was no longer home. I thought about the sacrifices, the calls to check in, the hopes that my family would love me. All of it had crumbled. But in the pain, a spark flickered. I didn't need them anymore. I could live for myself. I stood up and packed my things. I wouldn't return to that house. But before leaving the town, I needed someone to confide in, someone who understood me. Aunt Lara, my mother's older sister, lived a few miles away. She had always treated me like her own son. I got in the car and drove off, not looking back. The road to Aunt Lara's was bumpy, flanked by fields of wilted grass under a gray sky. I drove slowly, my heart heavy. Aunt Lara, my mother's eldest sister, was the one person I trusted. When I was a child, whenever my parents scolded me, I'd run to her house, sit by the fireplace, and listen to her stories. She wasn't wealthy, living simply in a small house, but she always made me feel safe. I parked in front of her yard. Aunt Lara was watering plants in the garden, her silver hair tied back neatly. When she saw me, she dropped the watering can, ran over, and hugged me tightly. "William, why the sudden visit? You look so tired." Her voice was warm, but her eyes were filled with concern as they met mine. We sat in her living room, steaming cups of tea in front of us. I told her everything: the storm, the cake, the gift, and the cruel words from my father, mother, and Jack. I spoke of my impoverished childhood, the years of sacrifice, and the fake phone call from my mother this morning. My voice trembled, but I didn't cry. Aunt Lara listened, her hands gripping her teacup tightly, her eyes welling up. When I finished, she sighed. "William, I'm not surprised. My little sister, your mother, has always been greedy, even as a child. She fought over toys, money, everything. I let her have her way because we were sisters, but I knew she'd never change. As for your father and Jack, their greed has blinded them. But you deserve to be loved, not used." She took my hand, her voice firm. "Listen to me, William. Toxic people, even family, don't deserve your sacrifices. Cut ties with them, live for yourself." Her words were like a gust of wind clearing the fog in my mind. I nodded, feeling a sense of relief for the first time in hours. I left Aunt Lara's house as the sun began to set. Her words echoed in my mind: live for yourself. Driving back to San Francisco, I looked at the sprawling fields, feeling like I was leaving a piece of my past behind. I was no longer the William of yesterday, the one clinging to false hopes about family. I was a new person, ready to set boundaries. I thought about everything I had given: money, time, affection, all poured into a bottomless pit. I remembered the late nights working when I first started my company, cutting back on personal expenses to send money home. I recalled the times Jack called, asking for more money, and how I always agreed, thinking it was brotherly love. But now I saw clearly. I didn't owe them anything. I didn't need to buy family with money. A decision came like a bolt of clarity. I would reevaluate all financial support. The $10,000 a month, that would stop. Living expenses, electricity, water, maintenance, I'd still cover those as a way to honor my parents' role in raising me. As for Jack, my brother, he needed to stand on his own. I wasn't his bank. As the city lights appeared in the distance, I felt free. The weight of family no longer pressed on my shoulders. I rolled down the car window, letting the cool night air rush in. I smiled, not out of joy, but because I knew I was on the right path. My life from now on would be my own. Back in San Francisco, I threw myself into work, but I didn't let myself drown in pain. I called the company accountant and asked for a review of the monthly transfers to my parents. "Stop the $10,000 payments starting next month," I said, my voice calm. The accountant was surprised but didn't ask questions. 3 weeks later, my mother called. I had anticipated this. "William, why didn't we get the money this month? Did you forget?" Her voice was sweet, but I could hear the underlying anxiety. "The company's going through a tough time, Mom," I replied evenly. "I'll only cover basic living expenses like electricity and water. You and Dad will have to manage the rest." It was a lie, but I felt no guilt. My company was still thriving, but I didn't want them to know. Her tone shifted, sharp and accusing. "You're so rich and now you're stingy with your own parents? We raised you and now you turn your back on us?" I gripped the phone tightly but didn't lose my temper. I had prepared for this moment. "Mom, I've done enough. Now I need to take care of myself," I said, then hung up. The phone buzzed relentlessly with messages from her and my father, full of blame. I didn't read them. Jack called a few days later, his voice dripping with flattery. "Bro, I need some cash for furniture. Just this once, help me out." I let out a bitter chuckle. Jack, stand on your own. I'm not an ATM. I hung up. For the first time, I felt strong and free. I sat in my penthouse gazing out at the shimmering San Francisco Bay. I had set boundaries. My parents, Jack, they no longer had control over me. I opened my laptop and started planning my new life. A trip, perhaps, or a charity project. Something for myself, not for them. A month passed and my parents went silent, probably thinking I'd changed my mind. But by the second month, my phone started buzzing incessantly. Not their numbers, but unfamiliar ones. Likely my mother borrowing a neighbor's phone. I didn't answer. Messages came through, my mother's tone a mix of anger and pleading. William, you can't do this to your parents. We're family. I deleted them immediately, my heart no longer aching like before. A few months later, Aunt Lara called with an update. My parents had fallen into financial trouble. Without the monthly allowance, they couldn't sustain their lavish lifestyle. The car my father bought last year, his pride and joy, was repossessed by the bank because they couldn't keep up with payments. The overseas vacations, the shopping sprees at malls, all gone. My mother complained to neighbors, calling me unfilial. But Aunt Lara said everyone in town knew what I had done for them. They brought this on themselves, William, she said. Don't feel guilty. Jack wasn't faring any better. He called a few times, begging for money, his tone alternating between flattery and irritation. Bro, just $5,000, I'm in a bind. I refused outright. Earn it yourself, Jack. He cursed and hung up. Aunt Lara told me Jack had been fired from the bank for laziness and was now living off loans. The house I had helped him buy was up for sale to cover his debts. I wasn't surprised. Jack had never valued what I gave him. From a distance, I saw the consequences hit them, not because I stopped providing, but because they had built their lives on greed. I still covered their basic living expenses, electricity, water, taxes, so they wouldn't end up homeless, but that was my final line. I was no longer an endless source of money. For the first time, I felt I wasn't responsible for them. They had to face themselves just as I had. I thought my family issues had been resolved. But no, my parents wouldn't give up. During a high-stakes workday, I was standing in the middle of a boardroom presenting our company's expansion plan to the Asian market to 10 key shareholders. The charts on the screen glowed brightly, my voice steady and confident. This was a moment I had prepared for months. But then the boardroom door swung open. My assistant Lisa stepped in, her face pale. William, you need to come to the lobby now, she whispered. Your parents, they're causing a scene. My heart sank, but I maintained my composure. My apologies, everyone. I need to handle an urgent matter. We'll resume in 10 minutes. The shareholders nodded, a few casting curious glances as I left the room. Down in the lobby, I was met with chaos. My father stood in the middle of a crowd of employees, pointing and shouting, his voice booming like thunder. William! Ungrateful son, so rich, yet letting his parents starve. My mother stood beside him, wailing. He's stingy, refusing to send money, leaving us to live like beggars, employees whispered among themselves, some pulling out phones to record. Customers at the reception desk stared. The more people watched, the more my parents seemed to revel in it, as if performing a play to humiliate me. I stepped forward, my heart pounding, but my face was stone cold. Dad, Mom, calm down, let's talk in my office. I tried to keep my tone measured, but my mother cut me off, pointing at my face. Talk? You turned your back on us and now you act polite in front of your employees? My father sneered. Look at him, the big boss who can't even face his own parents. The crowd fell silent, all eyes on me. I knew what they were thinking. William Blake, self-made millionaire, being called out by his own parents. But I wouldn't let them control the narrative. I turned to Lisa and said quietly, call the accountant down here with the records of all payments made to my family over the years. Lisa nodded and hurried off. I faced my parents, my voice calm but sharp. You want to talk about money? Fine, but we'll do it clearly with evidence. My mother scoffed. Evidence? All you do is lie. Minutes later, the head accountant, Sarah, appeared with a thick stack of documents. I took them and opened them in front of the crowd. "These are the bank statements from the past 5 years," I said, my voice ringing clear. "I sent $10,000 a month to my parents, totaling $600,000. I paid off my father's bank loans, bought them a car, renovated their house, covered electricity, water, taxes, totaling over $1.2 million. My brother Jack got money from me for a house, a car, and a job. You call me stingy. What are these amounts then?" The crowd murmured, this time not because of my parents. My mother stammered, You're lying. No way it's that much money." But I held up the statements and handed them to a nearby employee. "Read them aloud, let everyone hear." He read, each figure clear, each payment meticulously documented. My parents' faces paled. My father stepped back. My mother lowered her head, unable to meet anyone's eyes. I continued, my voice low but firm. "I stopped the allowance because I'm not a bank. If you want money, earn it yourselves. If you want to make a scene, I'll take this to court with all the evidence." The crowd was silent, a few nodding in agreement. My parents stood there like actors whose performance had ended. My father grabbed my mother's arm, muttering, "Let's go." They left without looking back, under the curious gazes of the onlookers. I returned to the boardroom, apologized to the shareholders, and resumed the presentation. No one mentioned the incident, but I knew they respected how I handled it. When the meeting ended, Lisa approached and whispered, "William, you were really strong." I gave a faint smile. Strong? Maybe. But inside, a new scar had just formed. After the conflicts and arguments with my family, I thought I'd feel hurt and lonely. But instead, I felt an unexpected sense of freedom and peace. I started new habits. I filled the emptiness of my penthouse. A bookshelf brimming with novels, a kitchen fragrant with homemade bread, and photos from my travels. I decided to live for myself, no longer bound by the past. I invested in genuine relationships. I dined with colleagues who valued my ideas. I joined a charity group, helping underprivileged children access education, something I had yearned for as a child. One afternoon, I met Anna, a volunteer at the charity center. Her radiant smile and stories about her dream to open a school for children in remote areas captivated me. I was drawn to her passion. We started talking regularly, not rushing, but enough to spark a new light in my heart. I also rediscovered old hobbies. I learned to cook, experimenting with intricate dishes like risotto or tiramisu. On weekends, I drove to the outskirts of town, hiking along trails, listening to birds and the wind. Those small moments made me feel alive, truly alive. I was no longer William of the family or William of the company. I was William, a 35-year-old man learning to love himself. The company continued to grow, but I stopped working myself to exhaustion. I hired more staff, delegated more, and made time for myself. I planned a trip to Japan to see cherry blossoms and meditate in a temple. My life was now a canvas I painted myself, with no one else holding the brush. A year had passed since my mother's birthday. Standing on my penthouse balcony, I looked out at the city glittering with lights. My phone was silent. No more accusatory messages or pleas for money. My parents and Jack had faded from my life, like a closed chapter. Aunt Lara still called, sending handwritten cards reminding me I had a family. Not by blood, but by love. I learned that family love can't be one-sided. I once thought if I tried hard enough, gave enough, my parents and Jack would love me. But love requires respect. They didn't respect me, didn't value what I did, and I couldn't keep sacrificing for something that would never come. I no longer sought their approval. I found it within myself, in the days I overcame poverty, in the company I built from nothing, in the smiles I brought to children at the charity center. Anna, now a close friend, once said, "William, you're the strongest person I know, not because of money, but because you chose yourself." Her words stayed with me. My new life isn't perfect. Some nights I still dream of my childhood, the old wooden house, and wake up feeling empty. But I don't let it drag me down. I've learned to stand up, to love myself, and to live true to my values. Today, I sit in a small cafe writing these words as a way to close the past. I think about my journey, from the poor boy called a burden to the free man standing in a big city. I think about that stormy night, the birthday cake, and the cruel words that changed everything. But above all, I think about the lesson I learned. Boundaries are necessary, even with family. Setting boundaries wasn't easy. It required facing pain, guilt, and the fear of losing what I once called family. But when I did, I found freedom. Freedom to live authentically, to love without fear of being used, to build a life based on self-respect. I don't hate my parents or Jack. I only regret that they chose greed over family. But I can't change them, only myself. I became my own role model, resilient, self-reliant, and valuing myself. If my story can inspire, I hope it reminds you, you deserve love and respect. And if needed, be brave enough to set boundaries to live the life you truly want. I stand up, leave the cafe, and step into the sunlight. Ahead is a new day, a new chapter. And this time I know I'll write it my way.